you finished up your steel piece, and now it's time to work on our aluminum piece. The first process that we're going to tackle in the aluminum piece is a process called knurling. That's with a K. Now knurling, if we look here at the sample piece, is applying a diamond pattern to the exterior of a diameter or a cylinder to give you grip as you're using it. So typically you're going to see knurling on things like a wrench handle or a hammer handle, something where you're going to have to grab. That knurling pattern gives you more grip when using that tool, so you have less chance of slipping. Now, to knurl, we have to use what's called a knurling tool. Okay? And the knurling tool has got very hard steel rollers that are going to imprint the knurling pattern in there. We're not cutting anything. We're actually going to use pressure to squeeze these wheels into the circumference of the workpiece and create that diamond pattern. Right? So we'll show you how to set that up here in a second, but let's look at the plans and discuss how we're going to go ahead and actually cut this. The workpiece you're going to get for the aluminum bar is about 4 inches long, okay, and we're going to do all of the work to create this piece, okay, with the aluminum bar sticking out from the collet, somewhere in the neighborhood of 2 3/4 inches. Okay, we're going to do all of the knurling, the threading, the turning, all of the work to get this down to shape with that bar held in the collet like this. Okay, when we're done with all this work, we're going to part this off and go ahead and clean up the outside. So for our first step of knurling, we're going to take this bar, okay, and if we look at the plans here, we can see the knurled portion is here, and that is extended, or from the end, about 2 3/8 of an inch. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to prep this, and it's nothing you haven't seen before. I'm going to go ahead and face this end. Okay, I'm going to turn my diameter down to 990 according to the plans, and then we will discuss setup for knurling and how do you load the tool and what settings do we need on the gearbox to go ahead and make this. So I'm going to clean this up and get it ready for knurling, and then we'll talk about knurling setup. All right, I've got the part ready for knurling. I'm going to walk you through setup real quick, but just to reiterate here, I loaded the aluminum bar. Okay, I've got about 2 3/4 of an inch sticking out. I faced the end to make it nice and flat. And then I've turned as much as I could to the 990 thousandths called out on the plans. All right? Just so you are aware, our workpiece is in here like this. Okay? And what we're going to do is we're going to knurl the end here for a little bit. In fact, I might even knurl this whole part because we're going to turn all this away. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how to set up the knurling and how to adjust our power feed, because we're going to use the power feed feature on the machine to go ahead and apply the knurling pattern. This isn't something that we can apply by rotating and moving the carriage by hand. We need something very, very consistent to do that. So I've got our knurling tool. This is a scissored knurling tool. Okay, we can screw this knob in or out to close the distance or gap between the two knurling wheels. So we're going to load this like any other tool. Okay, now the trick with these is we want this knurling tool to be as close to perpendicular to the axis of our workpiece as we can. So you could use a square to do this, or a quick and dirty way to do this is to use the end or the faced end of the workpiece to help you out. So I'm going to loosen up the tool post. I'm going to move the knurling tool in, and I'm simply going to use the end of the workpiece against the edge of the knurling tool to get me pretty close to square. All right, so now I've squared the knurling tool up so it's at a right angle to the axis of the workpiece. Okay, the next thing I need to do is line up the knurling tool so that the two wheels, the axis of the two wheels and the axis of the workpiece are in line with each other vertically. So I'm going to bring the workpiece over, and I'm just going to kind of eyeball this. It doesn't have to be perfect, but we want all of these to be close, or as close as we can get to in line with one another. And I think that's probably pretty close enough for what we're doing. The bottom one might be out a little bit far, but that'll adjust when we start tightening this up. All right, now I said we're going to use power feed. So we have to set our gearbox down here to a specific setting. Now when we talk about power feed, there's a chart on here that tells you the combination of gears, okay, what feed rate that'll give you. Now the feed rate is listed on the left, and the feed rate is in inches per revolution. So we're going to shoot for 16 inches, or 16 thousandths of an inch per revolution, which is BR4X. So I'm going to set my gearbox to B, and if it doesn't go, you're going to kind of have to fidget with it a little bit until you can get it to lock in here. There it goes. Okay, so I've got B, R, X, and the number 4 down here. Now what that means is for every rotation of the spindle, the carriage is going to move 16 thousandths of an inch. Right? Knurling, because it requires so much pressure and force to go ahead and make that diamond pattern form into the workpiece, we're going to do this at a very low speed. So normally we've been working around 1200, 800 RPM. We're going to turn this down to 260 RPM. Okay? So it's nice and slow, and we can control our feed as best we can. So we've got the gearbox set to the right speed. We've got the RPM set to the right speed. When we knurl, we have to think about the direction that we're going to knurl. For this operation, we're going to start by the headstock and knurl to the right, which means my feed, my power feed, has to go to the right. And that is controlled right here. So right now, I am set to feed left, but I want to feed right, so I'm going to switch that so I'm feeding to the right. Now, it's always a good idea to double check your settings before you start cutting. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to move the carriage out of the way. Okay, I'm going to turn the machine on, and I'm going to engage the power feed to ensure that I'm moving at the feed rate I think I'm supposed to, and I'm moving in the direction that I want to move. So our power feed is this knob right here. Okay, when we turn the machine on, we will lift it up to engage power feed, push it down when we are done with power feed. Anytime you are using power feed, your hand stays on the knob there. Okay? The power feed doesn't have an automatic shutoff, so if you don't shut it off, it's going to keep going to the right, or it's going to keep going to the left until something breaks. So let's check and make sure we're going the right way. So I should be feeding to the right, okay, and I can see I am indeed feeding to the right, so that setting is good. I am just about ready to knurl. Okay, I'm going to make sure I have a couple of things ready, and then I will show you how to go ahead and knurl. So we've set our tool perpendicular, we've set our tool in line with the axes of the workpiece, we've set our power feed, or our feed rate, we've set the direction, and our RPM. Okay? You are going to need a little bar that comes with the knurling tool, because we're going to use that to apply extra pressure to force the knurling pattern in, and you are going to need lubrication or oil. Okay? Because we're not cutting, we're forming. This is this process can create a lot of heat, and we need to dissipate that heat and lubricate the wheels and the workpiece as we're cutting. So I'm going to get everything set up, and then we will walk through how we're knurling. So we'll be back here in just a second. All right, we are all set up. I've got my knurling tool as close to the collet and the headstock as I feel comfortable, right? And I've got myself fed in to the correct center line of the axis of our workpiece. What I'm going to do is I'm going to turn the machine on, and I'm going to tighten this knob right here until I see these knurling wheels start to turn. And I'm going to tighten it as far as I can by hand. And when I cannot tighten it by hand anymore, I'm going to grab the little bar here, place it in one of the little holes, and continue to tighten until I feel like I've exerted enough pressure. This is kind of a by-feel thing, but it's going to be fairly tight. Once I have it tight, I'm going to engage the power feed and let the machine feed automatically until I have about half a knurling wheel sticking beyond the end of my workpiece. At that point, I need to do two things pretty quick. I need to shut off the power feed and shut off the machine. Okay, boom, boom. Okay, that way I don't over imprint or stay in one place while knurling too long. Okay, so we'll come back here as close to the collet as I can. Okay, I've got my oil ready to go. I've got my bar right here. Okay, a word to the wise, when this knurling tool starts to contact the workpiece, it's going to spin. Okay, you have to be very careful of where you put fingers and things while this is going, because anything that gets sucked into these knurling tools is going to come out as goop, okay, out the other end. Okay, so watch your fingers, okay, watch your clothes or anything dangly around this, because we don't want it caught in there. So I'm going to take a second, lubricate the wheels on the knurling tool. I'm going to apply lubrication down the length of the workpiece. Okay, and I'm going to turn this on and engage or tighten up my knurling tool here. First by hand, tight as you can go, then with the bar. Now you should be able to see that knurling pattern starting, so that's about as far as I'm going to go. Engage power feed. Hand stays on the power feed knob, and I will stop it when half of the knurling wheel comes off the other side or the other end of the workpiece. Okay, I like to watch the bottom wheel. That'll give me a good idea when I'm at a point I need to stop. Okay, and it's going to be off with the power feed, off with the machine. Off, off. Okay. Before I change anything or remove this, I am going to inspect the knurling that I've just created and make sure it is good. If it isn't, I still have an opportunity to try and come back and clean that pattern up. But I'm looking at this and the diamond pattern looks pretty good. It's a little weird up here where I stayed or I tightened this on, but a lot of that's going to get turned off in the end. So at this point I am comfortable with what I've got. I'm going to go ahead and loosen up the knurling tool, back it off, okay, and I have now all done knurling that workpiece. All right, so that, folks, is how you knurl. Next up, we're going to turn the end of this down, and we're going to talk about threading and how you put threads on the outside diameter of a workpiece.